Stand and Deliver. Hello and welcome to the Stand and Deliver comedy podcast with me, Rhodders. I'm a stand-up comedian, obviously I'm a podcaster, otherwise you wouldn't be listening to me now, and I run the Stand and Deliver comedy club up above Smoking Billy's in the centre of Reading. Who's this show for? Well, you listening right now. You're probably either a stand-up comic or you are a fan of comedy. It's the sort of person that loves to go out and watch stand-up comedy because it is, I'm a bit biased here, it is, I think, one of the greatest art forms that's ever been invented. It's certainly the art form that goes best with a nice pint of beer. So this podcast lets you into the weird behind-the-scenes world of stand-up comedy. I let you into the weird world I live in. And it's also an interview show as well. The sort of unwritten rule is that I interview people that have either performed at the Stand and Deliver Comedy Club or they've people I've met on the road at other people's gigs where I've been performing and we've had time and a chance to record a podcast. Now, I've been away at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. I've been back about a week, and to be honest with you, I'm still jet-lagged. How do you get jet-lag flying from, or getting the train from Scotland to England? Well, if you do a late-night show, that's how your whole body clock goes to bits. It's ridiculous. But while I was there, I had the time to record some very, very exciting interviews for the podcast. And amongst my Edinburgh Fringe interviews was the guest for today's show, Colt Cabana. So in a Stand and Deliver comedy podcast first, I interviewed a professional wrestler. But you're probably thinking, what place does a wrestler have on a podcast that's meant to be about comedy? Well, he's not just a wrestler. He's been appearing at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival for over 7 years, where he does a show where it's brilliant. It's just him and his comedy friends, including John Hastings, and they just sit down and they watch ridiculous clips from wrestling. And it's hilarious. He's also a stand-up comedian in his own right and a huge fan of stand-up comedy and a big supporter of the art. He may not have come to Reading to perform at the Stand and Deliver Comedy Club, but Colt Cabana was good enough to perform at my Edinburgh show last year. I ran a show at the ungodly hour of 11 a.m, and that is very early for Edinburgh because stuff goes on all night. It was called Murph in the Morning, and Colt Cabana was good enough to get out of bed early and come and do a stand-up set for me. Although there was a bit of confusion and he wasn't expecting it to be a comedy show. We'll hear about that in the interview. But it just shows you what a mad and wonderful place Edinburgh is. If you can have a professional wrestler get out of bed at an ungodly hour of the morning and come and perform stand-up comedy. It's brilliant. So I'll just before we get on to the interview with Colt Cabana, I just thought I'd give you a quick recap of what I did in Edinburgh. My original idea was to go to Edinburgh with my own solo show. But if you don't know how the Edinburgh Fringe Festival works, they take the whole city of Edinburgh and every little corner basically gets turned into a venue for stand-up comedy. Absolutely mad. Anything from the top deck of a double-decker bus to the smallest cupboard in the smallest of bars gets turned into a venue, and I'm not even exaggerating. Now, how it works, you have to apply because there's only so many venues and there's a ridiculous number of comics, and I think the number of comics must be hitting bursting point at the moment because annoyingly and upsettingly, to be honest, I didn't get a room. So I wasn't going to go to Edinburgh this year, something I was very disappointed about. But then it was my old comedy chum, Joe Baines, to the rescue. Himself and our other comedy colleague, Peter Merriment, decided to band together and put on our own show where the three of us did an hour together. It was called Global Comedy. I don't really know why. That was Joe's idea. And we performed at midnight until 1:30 in the morning in the basement of City Cafe, which is a late-night American-themed bar. And our venue wasn't particularly glamorous. It was a karaoke booth called the 90s Room, which I guess comfortably could fit about 15 to 20 people, but 15 and it was pretty cramped. And on the walls there were pictures of the Spice Girls and Oasis, and it was a 90s themed room, and it was absolutely ridiculous. I was really scared the first night because I just remembered the crowd being pretty rowdy and them all being crammed in that little room, and I thought this is going to be a nightmare. And then I was waiting in the corridor because there was no room for me to actually wait in the room, and I was announced onto stage. I burst through the door up onto our tiny postage stamp of a stage, and wow, they were really, really nice. It's really strange. Some nights, the audiences are just so different night to night. Some nights we can forget it was midnight, and it might as well have been 12 in the afternoon, because some of them were really lovely. Other nights were harder than others. Saturday night was a bit of a write-off, really. The crowd were just incredibly drunk, didn't really want to hear jokes, and just liked it when you took the mick out of them and insulted them, which is very, very weird. Like, I had a bit of a go at one bloke in the gig, and afterwards he met me at the bar and went, "Oh, thanks, mate, I really enjoyed that, really funny." I was thinking, why do people want this? Very, very bizarre. So it was kind of chaotic. My sort of schedule would be, I would do the gig at midnight till 1:30. Then sometimes I'd either go and watch a show or go and perform at another one. So I'd get to bed between about 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock in the morning. I would then wake up at about 9:30, just in time for the breakfast at the Hall of Residence that I was staying in. And then I'd either go straight out again, or to do gigs, or I'd go back to bed until lunchtime. So my whole day sort of shifted. So coming back to my normality of 9 to 5 working was a bit ridiculous. I was half asleep for all of last week. So it's pretty mad. All kinds of ridiculous things happen. And the way the Fringe works, it is a lot of the shows are free to get in, and then comics ask for a donation and a bucket on the way out. But this is the modern age. We came armed with a card reader, so people couldn't use the excuse of, "Oh, well, I haven't got any cash on me." But then... But this led to a rather ridiculous incident where Peter Merriment accidentally sat on his own card reader and effectively mugged himself. I was halfway through a joke, and at the back of the room I heard this beep as the card reader merrily deducted a £5 from Peter Merriment. Now, just to give you an idea of what we were performing in each night, I recorded a quick gig report with Joe after one of the shows, and this was an unusual show because we didn't have that many in, and 2 of them were just really, really difficult, but I ended up having a really nice time, and it just shows you how just your mindset and how your mood and how the room is, it just can be completely different each night. In fact, I'd been rock climbing. I managed to make friends with a guy called Trevor, he runs a print shop in Edinburgh. I just put out an appeal if there was anyone that wanted to go rock climbing, because I heard of an amazing rock climbing centre, and he replied. So I'd spent the whole day out of the Fringe rock climbing, and I think I was just full of adrenaline from that, so I think that might have pushed me through the gig a bit better. So, a bit of advice for you: if you want to do well at a gig, go rock climbing for about 4 hours beforehand. It's very weird though, and so here is me talking to Joe in the basement of City Cafe just after our Edinburgh show, sometime after 1:30 a.m. on Thursday the 22nd of August.
This is the Stand and Deliver Comedy Podcast with Rhodders.
We're in the 90s room at City Cafe, and we've just done it's my 3rd show with you, isn't it? Third show.
Yeah, third show.
Last night was busy. And then the first night was very, very busy. But today they're a bit odd. Some of them were really, really nice, and then 2 of them just sort of sat there, arms folded, and just kept being unhelpful.
And I kept losing my place because, I should have been better. I should have been way better than this. But I kept getting interrupted, and I didn't know, and I couldn't get back to it. I couldn't recover. So
It's weird, they were nicer last night, but I felt more in control and on top of stuff tonight.
Today you were on fire. You were way better than either of us two today. You engaged them all. So this was your crowd, basically.
It was difficult because, it was a very small room, so you're never going to get huge laughs. Although the Ohio people that have now moved to London, they had a lovely loud laugh. Especially the woman, she had a brilliant loud laugh, and that noise kind of lifted our spirit a bit. So I think if it wasn't for them, and the Swiss girls were nice, they were really funny.
Yeah, they were nice. I
mean, the cultural references they would have got of ours, they seem to like. But it is a strange venue, and do you want to have a go at describing it, the room we're in?
We're in a karaoke room, and it's a very small room. It's smaller than my bedroom. Actually, I would say my bedroom in central London is bigger than this. Way bigger than this.
Yeah, I think mine's probably about maybe a bit bigger. It's a karaoke booth. What's really weird about tonight, if we'd had this, I think I was tired last night, so if we'd had this happen last night, I would have been gutted, and I probably would have died, figuratively. I mean, I would have done badly on stage. But tonight, I went climbing, and I think I'm still full of climbing adrenaline.
See, for me, I went to sleep late because we got back late, and I had to wake up early, and so I am knackered. So I've not had any sleep. I've only had like 3 hours sleep.
Oh God, that's the toll Edinburgh takes. And you've also been here the whole month. I've only been here the week, so it's starting to catch up a bit.
I need to sort my sleep out. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So thank you very much. That was brilliant. Yeah,
no worries. Same again tomorrow, gents.
Yeah, same again tomorrow. All right.
That was Joe Baines and me, a rather sleep-deprived Joe Baines there in City Cafe in Edinburgh. We had a great run of gigs, but my goodness, did it make us tired. I do advise you go back into the archives of the Stand and Deliver podcast and listen to the episode I did with Joe Baines. Got an absolutely crazy life story to tell, well worth you listening to. Makes your commute a bit more interesting, I'm sure. Right, let's bring on our guest, shall we? None other than professional wrestler, stand-up comic, lover of all things stand-up comedy, Colt Cabana. And we discovered that actually stand-up comedy and professional wrestling have a lot more in common than you'd first think. We talked about how we ended up performing together at last year's Fringe, and how wrestling being viewed more as an art opens more possibilities for the wrestlers. How wrestlers can improvise and change things on the fly in the same way that a comedian can change up their set if things aren't working, and how they have to perform to different audiences, much in the same way comedians do, and how the structure of a wrestling match is actually pretty similar to the structure of a stand-up comedy set. We also hear about his unusual but highly successful and entertaining Edinburgh Fringe show, and the first time he performed stand-up comedy. This is Colt Cabana. Or rather, should I say, in the red corner, weighing in at 240 pounds, from Chicago, Illinois, this is Boom Boom Colt Cabana! Usually we interview comedians, but now we're interviewing a...
What are you saying?
Part-time comedian.
What are you saying? You saw my show the other night.
I did. No, I laughed. I was going to say occasional comedian, full-time professional wrestler.
I did comedy on your show.
You did, but you weren't expecting to, were you?
Correct. But did I do stand-up?
You did. And
I get the blue hairs to laugh?
You did indeed. Our audience of 60-year-old women absolutely loved the Stone Cold Steve Austin reference.
See?
No, what I did feel maybe I'd accidentally misled you with that, because you turned up. The show was called Mirth in the Morning, and it was a comedy compilation show themed around a radio show, because that used to be my job. And you turned up expecting a radio show, didn't you?
I expected to see. I mean, this Fringe, I was on BBC Radio Scotland, and when I showed up to do BBC Radio Scotland, I did a radio show, a chat show, which I'm good at. So I assumed yours was Murph in the Morning, which sounds like an American radio show.
Yeah, a New York Irish shock jock called
exactly,
Murph.
Yeah. Oh, Murph. I thought it was Murph. Okay, Mirth.
Mirth as in laughter.
That's not a word that I know.
Oh, brilliant.
Mirth in the Morning. Oh, that's even better now. And and so then it was stand-up, and I did stand-up. And so I'd like to think you could at least say I'm a bit of a stand-up.
Oh, no, exactly. You do more wrestling than stand-up, don't you? That's what I was getting at.
Okay.
Because if it were to say, full-time comic, you go, hang on a minute, I've done quite a lot of wrestling.
That's right. Hey, you know my job.
Exactly. I don't want to go through that. That table looks too small, even for me to go through, and I don't fancy doing that.
Well, this room is too small for me.
It is, isn't it? It's like a very budget cage match it would be. But let's not go there. I don't think people sometimes give wrestling as much credit, because just like with any other art forms, there's different ways of doing it, there's different styles, there's very serious wrestlers, and you specialise in a comedy genre of wrestling. Would you say that's true?
Correct.
So instead of, and I think there's loads of, you're still having to work a crowd, so how would you describe comedy wrestling as opposed to...
Well, first of all, when you say that the wrestling doesn't get as much credit in terms of the arts, it's because for so long we haven't been out as an art. So whereas Shakespeare in the whatever it was 1500s or whatever, he's like, I'm Shakespeare, we do theater. Whereas wrestling, up until probably the early 80s, wrestling was like, we're a legit sport. even though they were doing Shakespeare in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. So it's just now that some people are trying to kind of break that fourth wall and be like, hey, we're artists here. So maybe that's why we don't get as much love in the theater world or the art world. But I do comedy wrestling, which means I want to make people laugh. I'm not the wrestler who goes, oh, I'm going to hurt you. I'm the wrestler that's going to make the audience laugh. I'm going to probably throw my opponent off his game by doing something silly, and then that's how I'm going to win. So I do a justified version of it. It's not just like silliness for silliness sake. I stay within the boundaries of professional wrestling, and within that, I try to make my opponent laugh or make my fans laugh.
So the moves you're doing have to be possible within an athletic context,
right?
As if it is a legit contest, but then you bend the rules slightly and do daft things. So
or play with the crowd or do whatever.
Because it's amazing how closely guarded it all was, and then how wide open it is now. Because you hear stories of wrestlers not even telling their wives and going through these horrific, very bloody, brutal matches, not knowing that their wife being genuinely concerned about their health and not knowing that it was all staged. Do you think it's opened up possibilities for wrestlers now? Has it made does it give you more options in terms of what you can do as a performer?
Yeah, I guess, but I feel performers back in the day, even though wrestlers weren't telling their wives, but I think performers back in the day could look at wrestling and go, oh, I know what that is. Maybe they'd be good in the wrestling or in our world, the same, way, like, I don't know, the French Angel, Maurice Tillet did, was a 1930s, 40s, 50s, legend, the same way that they put him in movies because he was like a freak. It's like they knew he could do it because they were performers. But to the regular person, I guess we call them to the mark, back in the day, they didn't know what was going on, or they had an idea, but our industry wouldn't allow people to know. And so back then I think it was kind of the same. And now people know wrestlers can be showmen and showwomen in other aspects of theater, I think.
Are they? Do you find crowds somewhere are too smart? Because surely, when I go and watch a show, like Shakespeare's a good example. I'm not sitting there going, oh well, that's a very good soliloquy he's memorized. I'm trying to get caught up in the drama. Unlike with wrestling, because I first watched it when I was 9, and when I really get caught up in watching it now, I feel like I'm 9 when I didn't know any of the tricks and I didn't want to know any of the tricks, and you suspend belief, and then you go home, and then maybe you might talk about, oh well, how did he do that? Was there a trapdoor there or whatever? Do you find that you're now having to play sort of to two types of audience, ones that are prepared to suspend disbelief and then others that are just trying to get one over?
Yeah, but I feel I've been doing that for 20 years. Like, even when I started in 99, like the internet was still a thing and there was those kind of fans. There's always been those kind of fans. So maybe, the fan is a little more smart in terms of what we're doing now, but you would be the perfect example of the audience member that we would want as wrestlers. And I think fans, I don't know what their thought process is when they're saying there's a trap door. It's a bit annoying, but there's tons of them, and especially with the internet, as easily accessible as it is, it's not hard to do that as somebody at a wrestling show.
It's like the people who ask magicians after the show, oh well, how do you do that? Well, A, they're not going to tell you, and B, why do you want to know? Because it won't be as fun next time.
I would want to know.
Would
for
you?
Sure, for sure. I wouldn't ask them during the show, but I think if they would offer me up that information, I'd probably ask them. But then I would be like, great, trick me next time with a different trick.
So with wrestling done to a comedy style, what are obviously it's physical comedy, but how do you, is it still follow the same structure? I'm trying to sort of compare stand-up comedy to physical ring comedy. Is there still a setup and a punchline? How do you...
Yeah, I have my bits, I've got bits that I have that, I've got probably the same way you would have a joke, the same way on your hand right now, you've got a bunch of things written down, in the back of my head or my back pocket. Hypothetically, I would have stuff that I could go to, that I could do. I have longer ones, I have shorter ones. I know that if I'm doing a long one and it doesn't work if the setup isn't working, I'm not going to go for the punchline. I'm just going to move on to something else. And that's all trial and error. 20 years of kind of, and then 20 years I've been wrestling, but maybe, I don't know, 13 years, I've really been dissecting kind of this comedy style of wrestling that I've really liked and evolved. So it's been, maybe 13 years of really trying new stuff and seeing and understanding a crowd and that psychology. So like, I have a really good grasp of how to move crowds up and down through wrestling moves or emotion or whatever it might be. It could be emotion, but I like to use wrestling moves to bring their emotion up and down. Not necessarily, if you see my stuff, I don't necessarily like too much like, no, Colts, I love you, don't hurt him. It's more we're having fun and we're laughing.
Yeah,
so.
it's not the typical baby face trying to get sympathy off the crowd by being clobbered for a bit and then making a comeback. It's
Right.
much more surprising than that. And then occasionally you'll do something absolutely insane, like the moonsault you did off the apron in AEW doing that Battle Royal.
Yeah, I mean, when there's 15,000 people and you could do something cool, and I used to do that a lot when I was younger, but I just don't do it that as much, and so I want to bust out tricks. Especially wrestling fans kind of know me as a bit of a clown when it comes to wrestling, so I can always show a different side. I'm obviously trained.
Yeah.
It's like somebody who's an actor who's trained in comedy, and then it's like Jim Carrey. I'm not comparing myself to Jim Carrey, but Jim Carrey doing comedy, and then he does a serious role, and you're like, whoa, and it's like, yeah, he's a trained actor. So for me, it's like, yeah, he's a trained professional wrestler. He could do something crazy, or he could pull stuff out that you didn't think he was capable of.
Yeah.
I just like to do the other stuff, but I'll throw stuff in there.
Because I guess to the casual viewer, they don't have in the back of their head, oh yeah, he's been doing this for a long time, obviously he can do a range of things. They just see you there and then and what they've seen before. So if you pull out something unexpected, that's a way to get them, I suppose.
And I do that a lot. Like I do a backflip off the second rope a lot. Which people just don't expect me to do, especially now that I'm older. I'm almost 40, and I'm 240 pounds. So it's like when they see that, people are like, "Whoa!" And it's like, yeah, it's something I can do.
And also, you're like you seem to be the right, so it doesn't look completely mad. Like when Brock Lesnar did it and nearly landed on his head.
Yeah.
It just seems to think, well, why does someone of that size need to do that? Whereas if you've done it, it's surprising, but it seems like part of your arsenal that you keep hidden for an emergency match in a match.
Yeah.
But it's interesting you were saying about how if stuff's not going well, you can shorten the bit. So just if I'm out on stage and my bit's not going well, I can chop and change to another joke. But your humor is physical, and you've got another person that you're wrestling with. So how do they know when you want to swap the bit? Do you just rely on them being able to read you?
Well, as somebody who's been doing it a long time, and also we could talk in there. So as someone, I'm kind of the ringleader, the ring general of the match for the most part. And so I'll make that call, and then when they see I'm not doing the next thing that we're supposed to be doing, then a good wrestler will understand it and then probably wait for me to say, this is what we're going to do next, and then we'll go to that move, or we'll go to that bit. Or we'll, if someone's very experienced, then we'll feel off of what the crowd's energy is giving us. And that's the best when you have, like I am a singles wrestler, but we are doing this kind of together, and I'm having a different improv partner every single night of the week.
Yeah.
That's kind of what it is. So when you have someone who really knows what they're doing, it's not just me leading the charge, but we can do it together, and that's when it's really fun.
So there's other similarities to stand-up in the way that you're traveling, well, even more than stand-up. Stand-ups get a lot to travel around the same country. And in the UK, they spend a lot of time on the M3 motorway or in cars and stuff, and you're flying across whole countries.
Yeah, but when I started, I was, we were doing driving the highways and driving a lot, but now it's, the success has allowed me to fly around now, yeah.
So it's like you have a different type of audience every night. How do you and you've still got to get across your character, but the same way you've got to give that audience what they want. Like I bet a audience in, I'm just going to pull out the only states I know, I bet another crowd in Louisville, Kentucky will be have different taste to Atlanta, Georgia.
Yeah,
yet you can't suddenly change your gimmick totally.
No, but I can, because it's the same thing of like, if I was wrestling, let's use the UK as an example. One day, and this happened, one day I was wrestling at a Pontlands thing. Yeah, and then that night I wrestled, at the garage in Glasgow, which is 21 and over drunk people. So, I'm wrestling for the kids in the morning, and I'm wrestling for the crazy drunks at night. I'm gonna change. Yeah. To appease my crowd. So I'm going to do a little more sillier and a little more goofier for the kids. And then I'm going to be a little more raunchier at night, for the adults. And so that's kind of how you do change it.
So it's similar to how a comedian will do a cleaner set for a younger audience, or vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
And is it? I get, because the lineup of obviously, you know, from watching comedy and being involved in comedy, the lineup of a comedy night is so important, because if you're a one-liner comic and you follow another one-liner comic, that's already like the crowd are like, well, we've seen this.
Right.
So is it similar with wrestling, who you pair against who for matches?
Yeah, we call it wrestling psychology, and so there's a psychology of the match, you know, of an actual match. So it's the same idea of the psychology of a set. So, you know, you want to, if I'm going to do stand-up, I'm going to want to come, like, really early. I'm going to want to get them on my side. Like, I'm not just going to tell a long story that doesn't have a punchline for 3 minutes to open my set, right?
Yeah.
Did you agree with that?
Yeah, you got to win their trust.
Get a couple jokes off the bat to let them know that you're a funny person.
Especially the Brits, they're very nervous. If they don't think you know what you're doing, they'll panic and lose faith very, very quickly, I find.
Yeah. So with wrestling, you want to do some quick things. So they're like, oh, this one's going to have some action. It's going to be good. I like that person. I don't like that person. And then you build a psychology within a match. And it's the same thing within a match, within a card structure. You know, you want to have it's very similar to stand up. You want to have a 2-hour show is the best. You know, maybe stand up an hour and a half is the best. But for wrestling, a 2-hour show, very distinctive characters, and you want to kind of change it. You want good versus bad, and then sometimes maybe a woman's match, or a little person's match, or a tag team match. You know, just all different variety, and you want different variety within the card. You know, Dr. Tom, his famous line, Dr. Tom Pritchard, who was a trainer for the WWE, he trained The Rock, actually. He always said 31 flavors, which I don't know if you guys have, but it's an ice cream shop in America that's very famous. It's called 31 Flavors, where if you go to an ice cream store, not everyone wants chocolate. Some people want vanilla, some people want chocolate, some people want butterscotch, some people want, Rainbow Delight, and that's
there's no point all the wrestlers being the same, I guess.
It's people have different tastes, so you want to appease to everyone. Just like 31 Flavors it's called Baskin Robbins, but they're also called 31 Flavors. That's when you go into that store, you can choose, and so when you go to a wrestling show, you can, you get a variety.
Yeah, it's the same with comedy, isn't it? Like because I saw you the other night at Alternative Comedy Memorial Society, and I've been there twice this week, and that's the first time I've been to it. It's absolutely mad, because I went there to do a spot, and I thought, do they only like mental stuff? Do they only like weird acts? And then somebody got up and did some very, very sort of down the middle club style LA comedy, and they loved it. And I thought, oh, thank goodness. And I thought, oh, well, I can't be weird enough for this lot. They're going to hate me. But they just seem to want everything. And do you perform sets for them most nights while you're here?
That's where I do. Yeah, a lot of the stand up that I do is ACMS, and it seems very similar to like late like 2010 UCB culture, if you will, which I used to go to there a lot when I wrestled in Los Angeles. It was just very, the ACMS is just very friendly and giving and supportive is the word I'm looking for.
It's just they want entertainment, and they're not too fussed what it is.
Yeah.
Like we saw that woman wore a fat suit, climbed over everyone's chair, making weird noises, and they were all fine with that.
Yeah. I guess it's supposed to be madness, but they'll laugh at whatever you give them. So I think it's that supportive nature, and that was the whole point of ACMS, is that it's a place to do alternative stuff and to be supported, and you're supposed to do something different. And the crowd will go up and they'll lead you. Like, they don't want you to be embarrassed to try something different, because that's where probably great comedy comes from, is people trying stuff and doing something different. And if there wasn't a place like that, then, maybe we wouldn't get some of the weirder stuff in the world of comedy.
I guess it's the same true with wrestling. There needs to be places and there needs to be promotions that are open, like DDT in Japan. That seems to be my go-to if I want to see something absolutely mad, like a giant panda.
Right.
Is this sort of stuff really necessary for developing characters and stuff? Because if there are promotions that are more controlling, then isn't everyone going to be sort of the same, because they'll try to mold themselves towards what that place wants?
Yeah, I think it's important for performers to stretch the bounds of who they are as performers, to find out who they are. So it's not like we need maybe this person would make a great aunt, we don't know, but it's important for wrestlers to not be in one specific thing and just be able to do crazy shit. So then eventually they can get to the point where they are, or where they want to be, if that makes any sense. I guess it is a little bit what you said, but I mean, if you don't stretch the edges, you're not gonna, you can reel yourself in, but you're not gonna know what if you don't stretch those edges, your edges are gonna be so small, and you want to just be as wide and broad as humanly possible.
So you want to try as many things to find what you're actually
or
best
just
at.
that you have the freedom to try stuff. And a lot of people, that's like I guess WWE, they'll give them the wrestlers crap for us because it's just like these guys are afraid to experiment. Of course they are, because they're on national international
and
television.
it's their job. That's how they support their families. I think that's what a lot of
They don't
the
wanna
marks
fuck it
don't
up.
understand. What us watching at home.
So, but some of those people, that's where they get the best creativity, and that's how it was back in the day. But it's just everyone's under a microscope, and I get it. But when you do have an opportunity like that to just do whatever you want and not care and know that you can fail, that's an important thing, is that you can fail and you'll still be allowed to do it the next day. Whereas in big time wrestling, if you fail, that opportunity might not be there for you.
It's one of those things where you just, I guess with wrestling and stand-up, you have to learn it on the job by doing it. There's only so much theory before you just have to get up on a stage or in a
with
ring.
anything though. You can't. You can do as much college as you want, but you got to be in the workplace to figure out stuff out.
That's true, unless you're just writing essays and getting a doctorate or something. But when was the first time you did stand-up, and how sort of emotionally did it compare to when the first time you went out there and wrestled in front of an audience?
The first time I did stand-up was when I got fired for the WWE. Mick Foley was doing a stand-up show in Hollywood, and the promoter asked if I, because I was kind of hot right off WWE and known as a kind of a comedy guy, he was like, do you want to try stand-up and open for Mick? And I was like, yeah, of course I do. So I did 10 minutes. In my head, it was like memorizing a wrestling promo.
Right.
And so that's how I kind of did it. And like, I really liked that. It was like going over a match also, like when I was going over like my set in my head. And obviously like I had written it step by step by step when I was saying it to the crowd. But in the moment, with the wrestling knowledge that I had, I was able to kind of be a little bit looser and shake and move stuff around a little bit. But I did and do really enjoy it. I do like having a specific thing while I'm up there and knowing, like, if I have like 4 or 5 jokes that I know I have, it keeps me at ease. Whereas opposed to just like if they're like, oh, go up there for 20 minutes and I only have 10 minutes of material, that would freak me out. You
improvise. You prefer improvising in the ring more to improvising when doing a stand-up set.
Well, because I'm just not as experienced in the stand-up. And I'd love to be at a point in stand-up where I'd be as comfortable on the stage as I am in the ring. That would be a goal of mine.
But having all the doing the promos and stuff must be a massive head start.
Of course, yeah. I'm at more of an advantage than I am than people starting off because I have 20 years of stage experience. But which happens to be in the ring, But I'm less of than a seasoned stand-up pro.
There seems to be an unusually high percentage of comedians that are mad on wrestling. What do you think the reason behind that is? Do you think because it does seem to be, now that wrestling has thankfully become cool again and more people are watching it and more people are tuned, like the British TV are mad for not putting it on TV because like there's big shows. Progress Wrestling in London sells hundreds of tickets every month.
They threw it on ITV.
And it lasted one show. I was so disappointed because I was prepared to stick with that. I would have watched that no matter what it was like every week out of patriotism.
Of course. Well, it's good for me with the crossover because I love comedy so much, and so I have a lot of friends within comedy that love wrestling, so I'm accepted and I'm brought into the scene, and it's great for me,
Fantastic.
What the reason is, I don't know. I think we're all kind of dorks in one way or another, so a lot of us like comic books, or a lot of us like G.I. Joe or wrestling. It's just different things, and just with the numbers, it's, I think there's more people that like comic books and G.I. Joe than are like suave nightclub boys, like cool people, I guess.
Because that's what I was saying. That maybe that's it. Because the sort of comedy I like is the kind of counterculture, a bit on the fringes, a bit mad, like people like Paul Foot or Paul F. Taylor. Not just people called Paul, but it's all the stuff. And the wrestlers I like are the ones that are a bit renegade and anarchic.
Paul Orndorff, Paul White,
Paul London.
Paul London, yeah.
Yeah, but I wonder if there's that kind of kicking against something, underdog mentality that goes with it.
Maybe.
Yeah. So, I just want to talk about your Edinburgh show. It's now been running for how many years now?
This is the 7th year doing it.
Yeah.
And I did it with 6 years with a guy named Brendan Burns, who won the Edinburgh Fringe Festival in 2008. We started in 2013, and then this year, John Hastings took over the spot for Brendan Burns, and it's been wonderful. We watch wrestling every single night, different clips, different guests, and we've had some really great guests this year. Which is kind of cool because someone the other day was just like, "Whoa, you guys are getting really good guests," and there was a clip of me like hanging on stage with Nish Kumar, and David O'Doherty did our show.
Was that when he explained Brexit to you?
Yeah,
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah, so yeah, it's fun. I think just because I'm from a different world, but I'm also doing a show every night, and I've been doing it for a long time. I'm meeting these people, I'm making friends with different people, and John's such a seasoned comedian, so. Between the two of us, we have a lot of great friends up here at the Fringe to do fun guests with and watch wrestling with. And, as long as I don't get bound down by some kind of contract or whatever, I'd like to be here for another 10 years if possible. I really enjoy doing the Fringe. And by contract, I would also mean family, maybe too.
Yeah.
I don't get bound down by a family. But I really enjoy it. I really love coming and watching shows. I like to get inspired. I like seeing other arts, other culture. And then every night at 11, I get to watch wrestling and make some money.
Because it's established now, because it's been going a few years, and it's one of those shows you have to book a ticket, otherwise the odds of you getting in is quite small. It's either full or there's only a tiny percentage of seats left. What was it like the first year? Did it seem like a crazy idea, or because it's very left field?
No, because I'm such a comedy nerd. I had always heard of the Fringe. I'd heard of people going to Edinburgh. The year before that, there was a comedian named Eddie Pepitone who I used to listen to his podcast, and he talked about how he went to the Edinburgh, and so I would get a kind of a decent understanding of what these people were doing. I kind of got the idea that you go over there and do the same show every single night and all these little venues, and so I knew I kind of knew what I was getting into. Obviously, when I got here, it was crazier on a much bigger scale than I'd ever thought it would be. But because it's all within like a mile radius and you could walk anywhere and get anywhere, that's what I really like. It's just like this little town of comedy.
It's like a comedy planet, isn't it? It's very bizarre. It's like no place in the universe.
There's nothing like it. And so that's why I love being here, and I love being involved, and I love that I'm accepted. So, the first year was in a 50-seater, and we did pretty good numbers. The next year we moved to a 150-seater, and the numbers weren't as good. We weren't feeling, but we had some good nights. But every year it's gotten better. The format's gotten better. It's gotten crisper. I've figured out the show a lot more. I'm kind of like the MC of it. I'm leading all the clips, and so.
Yeah, and the tech seems to run pretty smoothly, and it just like there's an awful lot of stuff packed into that hour. It's amazing when you look at watch and think, oh wow, how did they get through all that in an hour? Right,
it goes by quick, and I think that's the cool thing about the Fringe is it's a 60-minute show. People only expect a 60-minute show, so we leave them wanting more. And hopefully they say they'll come back the next show.
You can see it definitely more than once because it's different guests and all sorts. I think it's almost better for non-wrestling fans though. The look on my mate Joe's face when he did never watch wrestling, he sat there and he was like, "What?"
But that's the marketing problem, is getting the people that don't know to come, because I think a lot of people think it's just for wrestling fans. But that's the key. That's where we're a little stuck of like, how do we tell the world that it is for not? It's almost more for non-wrestling fans than it is.
Well, that's what I told my mate, because I was like, there's always a sizable percentage of people that don't watch wrestling, and that segment when you find a non-wrestling fan and tell them, get them to guess what happens next,
right?
And some of the stories are so predictable that they always get it right. Oh, brilliant! Yeah. Well, thank you very much for inviting me into your Edinburgh studio apartment.
Yeah, that's right.
Where can people go to find out where you will be appearing next?
Oh, well, at Colt Cabana is my Twitter and my Instagram, and my website is coltcabana.com. And maybe I did a documentary about comedy wrestling, which involves myself, Grado, who is on Two Doors Down, for the ones who don't know who Grado is, and a Japanese wrestler named Kikutaro. We did like a weekend of wrestling shows, and we documented it. We kind of broke down comedy wrestling in general, and it's called The Wrestling Road Diaries 3, and that's available. You can find that at coltcabana.com, and you could digitally download it or buy a hard copy, and I'll send it to you signed. That's about it.
Brilliant. Colt Cabana.
I'd say listen to my podcast, but I'm wrapping my podcast up, so you can't listen to it.
Get on the Patreon and watch it and listen to it once a quarter or something.
I don't know, man.
No? Okay.
Yeah, I got all the old archives. Myself and Marty are doing something. Marty DeRosa, another stand-up. We're going to do a quarterly podcast. I'm going to put stuff out. I've been putting out so much Fringe stuff, a bunch of clips and whole shows. So if you want to watch the whole show of David O'Doherty watch wrestling, which is something you probably never knew you'd want to see, patreon.com/Colt Cabana.
Brilliant. Colt Cabana, thank you very much.
Cheers.
This is the Stand and Deliver Comedy Podcast.
So that was Colt Cabana, an unusual guest, but an excellent one. Thanks so much for taking the time to talk to me the other week in Edinburgh. So we now learned that stand-up comedy and wrestling aren't really that different. Although I'd really like to think in stand-up comedy there is a lot less chance of being thrown through a table. Although, if you've ever gigged in Swindon, you do wonder. Right, there's just about enough time for me to wrap up this podcast neatly with some upcoming gigs from my diary and some news of what's happening at the Stand and Deliver Comedy Club. On the 12th of September, Stand and Deliver is back after its summer holiday. And, we've got an amazing opener. We have Bob Munro, incredibly dry, witty, and unusual one-liners. The last time I saw him was at the Blackout in Greenwich, which is a notoriously difficult comedy competition. And our headline is Harriet Dyer. She's absolutely brilliant. You might have heard her on BBC Radio 4 Extra, or seen her on BBC 3. And she was also on Dinner Date, where she didn't cook the chicken properly. Although more importantly, she's an excellent comedian and well worth coming to see. And I will be hosting the show. I'm your MC for that evening, and I love MCing at the club. You never know what's going to happen when I'm on stage, because I certainly don't. At time of recording, there are still some tickets left, so go to standanddelivercomedy.com or go to Facebook and look up Stand and Deliver Comedy Club and book your tickets right now. One more highlight from my gig diary before I go. On Tuesday, the 24th of September, I'm going to be at the Off the Rails Comedy Night in Winchester at the Railway Inn. It's meant to be a good one. Never performed there before. Well, I have, but not for this promoter. But it looks like it's going to be a really fun night, so turn up there if you're near Winchester. Why not? And that's pretty much it for today's podcast. Thanks so much for listening. Our theme music was recorded and composed by Adam Weikert. You can find out more at adamweikert.com, Weikert. Please, if you've enjoyed it, write me a review on Apple Podcasts or iTunes, as it might still be called. I'm not really sure. They've sort of done a rebrand. Why do I keep begging you guys to write reviews? Because it actually matters. It makes a difference to the number of people that hear the podcast, because every good review sends us higher up the podcast charts, gets more eyes on it, and therefore more eyes means more ears, because people click download. It's really, really quick for you to do, and if you can't do it because maybe you listen to it on something weird that doesn't allow you to review, just share it, post it on your Facebook, send it to a friend who's into comedy, and I'll be very, very grateful. So this is Rhodders signing out for the Stand and Deliver